Jordan Shanks, an independent journalist who goes by friendlyjordies online, is a divisive personality, often despised by traditional media. He's built a massive audience via self-publication and social media with over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. In March this year, he released a series of recordings of New South Wales former Deputy Premier John Barilaro bragging about pork barrelling his way into office in the 2019 state elections. I'm Thomas Zeng, and joining me today is Mary Ma, Bianca Banya, and Natalie Chia.
John Barilaro is said to have pork barreled his way into his Deputy Premier position. Now, in his video, Jordan Shanks describes this as diverting taxpayer money to projects or initiatives designed specifically to win electorates. It's not only corrupt, but it was money that wasn't budgeted and didn't exist.
During Shanks' original video, You Can Have It All, a series of secretly recorded audio memos are included. And these recordings are taken from a dinner party that was held 5 days before the release of the 2019 October state elections. Members of the National Liberal Party were present, and I'm just going to play a few key excerpts.
So, if all the local community is talking about it, why are the rest of the media ignoring the story?
So the Media Watch video, published on 20th of March, 19 days after Shanks released the recording, revealed that due to the law in New South Wales, the Surveillance Devices Act 2007, it did not allow the broadcast of the recordings.
So the release of these tapes with what amounts to basically admission of corruption should have been a massive political bombshell. But media coverage on the release of these tapes was nowhere to be seen, aside from a single local radio station and a Media Watch episode.
Bianca, what do you feel about these laws and how they are restricting whistleblowing journalism?
They definitely make it quite difficult to put stories like this out because they also don't allow for a defence of public interest.
Considering this is a story of corruption, you would find that to be fairly important. Thomas?
Irrespective of the law, I think journalists have a role to play in exposing corruption, even if that puts themselves at risk.
Absolutely.
Especially because this is a massive thing that is of public interest.
He was in office for 5 years.
Yeah.
And then when he stepped down later on, what was released to the public was he'd been cyberbullied out of his position. Poor Barilaro.
Yeah, he resigned. I think I've seen journalists, put themselves at risk for far more selfish reasons, right?
Definitely.
They'll go after celebrities, they'll invade their privacy and record them in secret and publish that just for clicks. And to not do that here and use the defense of the law, I think is abhorrent. It's terrible.
So it is also interesting that within Australia, these surveillance laws differ from state to state. So while in New South Wales, there is no instance where privately recorded audio memos can be used in the court of law or released to the media. In Victoria, for instance, these recordings can be used as long as the person doing the recording is a party to the conversation, which does call for law changes, as Media Watch mentioned throughout their video.
I think Media Watch as an organisation itself has plenty of issues as well. Media Watch is meant to be this sort of watchdog agency that holds the media accountable, but I think being owned by ADC, they can't do that. There's a difference between being a watchdog organisation, which is what it's meant to be, and just providing a centrist point of view every single time.
Yes, but some tiny little news agency from down the south coast and Media Watch were the only sources to be reporting on this. And so, yes, the ABC is limited in what they can do. They're doing more than everybody else. Jordan Shanks is quite a controversial and not hidden, but Gen Z would probably be the only ones to have heard of him. So in terms of getting this news out to older people, I feel like Media Watch and the trusty old ABC is possibly a way to do this.
In this case, I do think that Shanks does serve the true watchdog generalization of journalism by protecting the community, exposing politicians. Through his YouTube videos, Shanks does open his comment sections and allow people to have some kind of way to form their own opinions and just type whatever they feel. And through his videos, it does put this corruption for the whole world to see.
I have a few little recordings of a certain former Deputy Premier of New South Wales. Any guesses as to who that would be?
Bianca, have you heard of friendlyjordies and what do you think of him as a personality?
So Jordan's a political commentator, but he's also got a comedian background, which he really incorporates to his videos. That's why people see it as a bit harsh, because he's trying to be funny. And, that's obviously led to some serious consequences throughout the years.
Yeah, his house, was it November of last year, 2022? Was subject to 2 arson attacks.
I mean, to say the obvious, I think Shanks' tendency to use mockery to express disagreement and his frequency of expose-style content makes him plenty of enemies in high places, right? But I respect his willingness to make enemies out of powerful people for the sake of journalistic content, and that's a trait I wish more journalists had.
In 2022, he faced a defamation case from Barilaro for certain terms he used during a video.
Jordan had to pay $100,000 in legal fees, but Barilaro received none of that money. To get away with no criminal charges and only having to write an apology, that is pretty incredible as far as journalism and defamation cases go. He technically lost the case, but in terms of outcome, I think he probably got the best possible option.
I would agree, and considering his apology was, and I quote, "Mr. Shanks accepts that some of the videos he posted were offensive to Barilaro. Mr. Shanks understands that Mr. Barilaro has been hurt and apologises to him for that hurt." So I can't read that without laughing.
I would say that's a heartfelt apology.
Yeah,
and I think
it seems like he's still mocking him even in the apology.
Exactly. I think it's iconic.
It's like some of the comments he made did actually go too far. It's not even criticizing, it's so unnecessary. Like he was repeatedly calling Barilaro a wog, and that's not even commentary anymore, that's just like racist hate speech.
I don't agree with everything Jordan puts out, but it's a refreshing change of pace from sort of the distant objectivism of traditional organizations. Hearing someone actually present their thoughts on them, I think, is a refreshing change.
And he does present himself from Wikipedia. He is described as a political commentator. And I do feel that in instances like this, there's no way to be presenting a revelation story about an allegedly corrupt politician without having some political bias.
I think his continued existence as a journalist is a symbolic moving forward of journalism towards independent and social media-based coverage.
So in the future, if we are wanting to be getting these whistleblowing media stories, how could we possibly become aware of these stories?
I mean, I think the obvious answer is that the law needs to change, right? That's a really overly optimistic way of looking at it because the law is very, very slow to respond to changes. And I think it's even slower when the people in charge of moving it, the politicians, are the ones being exposed.
Yeah.
They're not going to want these laws to pass, right? So it's a process that needs to happen and probably will happen eventually, but it's going to be a very long road there.
Because the law has the clause that you can't have public interest as a defense that causes more problems, I feel like it could benefit the entire law. Instead of trying to completely change it, just allow for that defense.
I think it does depend on the situation, on the context of where this recording is and what is it about. Because if we are just talking about the recorder's rights or the person being recorded, but in the context of this is the entirety of New South Wales in a way.
The moral justification for this recording in the standard journalistic ethics, there's three of them, right? I think this information fits at bare minimum two of those three criteria. He has clearly told us that Barilaro has not consented to this recording. So the audience knows that this is a recording that Shanks obtained, quote unquote, illegally. And I don't think anyone would argue about this information being public defense. Is there another way to get the story? I don't know.
I definitely agree with you, Thomas. It's completely wrong for you to give money to people who are expecting, what is it? During the recording later on, he mentions it's for hospitals and if someone needs a fire station, it's not as if he's building a road. These are essential to these communities. And for you to lie that you have the funds and you are willing to do this and then not following through, it's like lives at stake. It's not
100%.
something to just joke about.
I think overall, Shanks as a YouTuber, but also like a political commentator, journalist, he is very brave in this day and age to come up with this type of content to expose politicians, as I don't think anyone else would risk doing it too.
Putting his own life at risk to get these stories out.
Yeah, and if they're trying to shut him up, he's probably doing something right.
Thanks for tuning in today. If this is your first time hearing about this controversy, you're welcome. There's not a lot of coverage out there, as we've mentioned, but we do encourage you to listen to the original recordings in their entirety available on Friendly Jordies' website.